I will now call to order the Board of Clackamas County Commissioners issues and updates for September 19, 2023. Today we have Nancy Bush, our Clackamas County Operations Officer in Gary Schmidt's place. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. We do have Commissioner Shull here as well as Chair Smith. We do have Commissioner West and Commissioner Schrader on the way, and Commissioner Savas is out today.
Okay.
So first we need you
Nancy, we do not have a quorum present to conduct business. So we're going to have to wait for their arrival.
Okay.
The cameras will roll, and people in the audience who have considerable staff people, you may continue your conversations until a third commissioner arrives to give us a quorum.
Thank you.
Are the microphones on? I believe they are.
They are on.
Yes, I got a signal. Yes, they are. I have already called this meeting to order. Commissioner Schrader, she has just joined us to give this board a quorum. Nancy, please introduce the first item.
Yes, please convene as the Water Environment Services.
I will recess as the Board of County Commissioners, and I will convene as the Water Environment Services Board.
And we have Greg Geist here, the Director of WES. This is consent agenda approval of a joint funding agreement with the U.S. Geological Survey for Johnson Creek water quality and flow monitoring. Total agreement value is $61,800 for 5 years. Funding is through Water Environment Services Surface Water Operating Fund. No general funds are involved.
Thank you, Nancy. Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. This is a pretty straightforward contract. We've been doing this for many years with the United States Geological Survey. It's us, a couple cities, and some other agencies. It's real-time stream flow and groundwater monitoring in the Johnson Creek watershed. We do it to comply with DEQ regulations, and it also helps the county with floodplain and flood maps. The data is publicly accessible to anyone who wants to look at it. It's available on the internet. And that's pretty much it. 5-year contract.
And data is currently available, you say?
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or objections? Seeing none, thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. So would you please reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners?
I will recess as Water Environment Services and reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners.
We have a consent item number 1, approval of a lease of a commercial space in the Abernathy property to house the CCSO Marine Patrol Unit. Total value is $211,922.02 over 3 years. Funding is through budgeted county funds. We have Jeff Jorgensen here from Facilities Management, as well as Sergeant Nate Thompson from CCSO.
Please come forward and introduce yourselves.
Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners, Administrator Bush, Acting Administrator Bush. Morning. Just coming here to request authorization to go ahead and lease the property down at the old Abernathy complex, which is it's called the Blue at Abernathy now. Building number 6 for the Marine and Dive Unit. And any questions you have for the Marine and Dive Unit, went through the whole negotiation, but it's a 3-year lease for them to basically occupy that building. So if you had any.
How is this different than what we have done in the past?
We're in a building that's close to it in Abernathy right now. It's the one that's it's Abernathy Creek building, which is right along the creek.
So when we move the new facilities to Beaver Creek Road, some of the sheriff's vehicles are being moved there as well, and some are not. Is that correct? Is that what we're supposed to understand today?
All the fleet vehicles were definitely moved up to the new DTD building, the Transportation Services Building. The boats and the units they've been kind of outside in the back lot down there, they'll be inside this building, or
So
we've got 19 parking spaces around the
19 space,
building.
but it's the boats and all of the stuff required for water patrol or rescue, or however you want to word it. I'm not sure, Thompson, if I'm saying that right.
Yes, that's correct. That is where we house a lot of our boats that aren't currently on the water, as well as the trailers for the boats that are on the water, with our other water rescue equipment and water rescue boats that are stored there.
So it'll be in the building, and we're allowed to do maintenance, repairs, improvements in the building for them. They don't want it around the outside, but we do have 19 spots around the outside.
Has this been budgeted for?
This is what was approved by the sheriff's office as part of their budget. That's,
Yeah, and this Board of County Commissioners approved this.
it's part of their budget, that's all I could say. That's-
I was looking at the terms here, and how much is that a month? Because there was lease payments of $3,571.
The first year, yeah, 3,571 is the first year of the annual payment, but you're also paying common area maintenance, because now that it's owned by a private group, the common area maintenance charges are parking and lighting and all that kind of stuff. So it basically adds up to, just about 5,800 monthly.
I'm looking on page 4. The total cost for the first year of this lease is $68,563. Is that right? Is that correct? And am I reading this right? Or maybe I'm not.
On page 4 of the lease?
Page 4 of the document that's in our packet.
Okay. So the first year of the lease is a total of $68,563.20. That's the common area maintenance charges and the lease amount.
Okay. So, but this is new because we've never been charged the common area maintenance before.
It's different because you have a private owner. When
I
facilities.
know we have a private owner. I'm saying, Jeff, this is different. And is it more than what DTD would normally be leasing to the sheriff's office? So therefore, is it budgeted for? Did we know this in the budget that we just approved?
I would have to say that we knew that it was coming, it was coming our way. That's all I could tell you. I really don't know. I believe that the sheriff had to budget for it.
Commissioner Scholl, did you have questions?
Yeah, I understand that this amount is in the sheriff's budget for FY '23-24, and it's not additional monies coming out of the general fund.
No, it's supposed to be within their budget.
Okay. Any further questions or discussions? Seeing no objections. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next up, we have Transportation Development, approval of a sale of 8 parcels to Columbia Land Trust. Transfer value is $3,139.91. Funding is through Columbia Land Trust. No county general funds are involved. And we have Dan Johnson here, the Director of DTD.
Thank you so much, Chair Smith, Commissioners. Nice to see you today. Essentially, we're here to request the approval to sell 8 tax lots. Those lots are in your materials. Essentially, these are all parcels that are unimproved and lie within or partially within a floodplain and/or within a mitigation hazard zone with little or no redevelopment potential. And so essentially, when Property Disposition was looking to facilitate their auction in 2023, we basically, as you all are very aware, we circulate that list to nonprofits and public agencies to see if there's an interest in those individuals. We did receive interest on these properties that have little ability to be sold at auction because of their limited development potential. Columbia Land Trust, which is a nonprofit with a mission to conserve and care for vital lands and waterways and wildlife, basically submitted a request to acquire these properties. Their intent is to conserve and maintain these properties and improve permanent public access to the Sandy River. Essentially, the transfer value, which is $3,139.91, is based on back taxes, interest, penalties owed, plus associated costs, and the property disposition administrative fee, which is per county policy. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any comments or questions? Seeing no objections, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Technology Services, approval of board order authorizing a purchase of order to renew annual software support services from Oracle America, Inc. for PeopleSoft software. Purchase order is valued $568,680.82. Funding is through departmental cost allocations. No county general funds are involved. We have Lanu Paparelli, who is the director, and we also have Keelan Cleary, who is the assistant director.
Thank you, Nancy. Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. We are here today to request your approval for the renewal of our contract, PeopleSoft contract, which is the maintenance support contract with Oracle America. This is a standard annual renewal. We use PeopleSoft software for our human resources and financial enterprise planning resource systems. And the total amount is $568,680.82. And funding is through department cost allocation. No general funds are involved. And we request your approval for this standard annual renewal. Thank you.
Questions or comments?
I have one,
Yeah,
Chair.
Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, on this $568,000, is that, what kind of increase is that over the previous year?
So last year, our total amount was $546,556. So there is a $22,000 increase, which is sort of pretty close to, within their.
About a 5%,
Within
okay.
their, 5%, 3 to
Okay.
4% increase.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing no objections, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Department of Health, Housing, and Human Services. We have Rod Cook coming up as the department director. Number 1 is approval of a subrecipient grant agreement with Cascade AIDS Project for HIV testing and counseling services. Agreement value is $75,146 for 2 years. Funding is through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Oregon Health Authority, and no general county funds are involved. Rod.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. The county receives pass-through funding from the local public health authority agreement with the state of Oregon, a mix of federal and state funding to detect HIV early, direct HIV-positive individuals to care, and to achieve 0 new infections within 5 years. The program encompasses a range of strategies and interventions, including HIV testing and outreach, referral services, health literacy and education, care linkage, contraception distribution, community mobilization, and participation and community involvement.
Commissioner West?
I do not actually have a question. Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm sorry.
Questions or comments? Seeing no objections, thank you.
All right, number 2, approval of a personnel services contract with the Catholic Charities for Supportive Housing Services at Good Shepherd Village. Contract value is $1,063,268 for 1 year. Funding is through Supportive Housing Services Measure Funds. No county general funds are involved.
Okay, Good Shepherd Village is a 58-unit affordable housing community in Happy Valley. This is supported by federal and local vouchers and services. Catholic Charities will provide resident services and supportive housing to Good Shepherd Village residents through this contract, including staff, health care, case management, 24/7 front desk support, and security.
Questions or comments? Commissioner
Yes.
Scholl?
Is this project full, all rooms filled? In other words, is it operating at full capacity? 58 units, 58 PSH units?
Is it operating at 58? Is it at full capacity
Yeah,
today?
Yes.
I'm going to have to get back to you on
Okay.
that. It should be,
Okay.
but I don't want to give you that without checking on it.
All right, good, thanks.
Yes.
Seeing no objections, thank you, Rod.
All right. Item number 3, approval to apply for all internal and external annual continuum of care programs, grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Grant value is $481,184 for 1 year. Funding is through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development with a $1,370,296 match. Funding through Supportive Housing Services Measure Funds, other funding sources, and $107,455 in budgeted county general funds.
Yes. As the local continuum of care agency, Clackamas County CLC is responsible for completing the consolidated application for funding. Clackamas County CLC serves as the connection point for federally funded homeless services. Clackamas County CLC hosts a competitive process to determine the alignment of proposed funding projects with the HUD priorities and county goals, ranking them for recommendation and final funding determination. The match requirement for this grant is a little over 1.3 million. Of that amount, 1.2 of it is paid from different funding sources, including other federal, state, and local funds, and $107,455 is from budgeted county funds.
Can you tell me what services are provided in this?
We talked a little bit a couple of weeks ago about the HMIS, which is the software system. So if you needed housing, there's a number you can call, and they will organize what your needs are, and then give you referrals to placement. So that's one part of the continuum. But this is really several nonprofits. I have you can't see it from here, but that's probably about 20 different nonprofits that also put in this pre-application, I'll call it. We do the scoring here, and then we send that into the federal government. Then if they approve it, it comes back to us.
Okay, but
go ahead.
Thank you for that, I appreciate that, and I saw the list, but what are you doing for these people? This board has said we want to look at a recovery first model. I see the word homeless, I see you be housing homeless. What are you doing with those people specifically?
Adam's coming up to help.
Thank you, Adam, would you introduce yourself? Can you answer my question?
Yeah, good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners. Adam Brown, Deputy Director, Health, Housing, and Human Services. So, historically, the role that the COC funds and the consolidated application funds have played in Clackamas County is funding the whole suite of homeless services, from outreach and engagement services all the way to permanent supportive housing and everything in between. And so as we with the Supportive Housing Services Measure funds and new local resources, we've continued to fund that whole suite of services with these continuum of care funds, and then over time, we'll look at ways of optimizing those federal resources, like say repositioning them to the rural areas. So for the current COC application, it doesn't really contemplate any changes to the programs funding, again, that whole suite of services, but we did initiate the conversation with HUD about, can we position SHS locally to backfill some of these programs and then eventually fund more services in the rural area. But it's restricted to funding the suite of homeless services, from outreach and engagement to permanent supportive housing.
Okay, and can we review again, what is our outreach? What does that look like? And then what's our engagement with these people? I assume who are on the street?
That's correct.
Okay, we go to them and say, hey, do you take a look at causation of that? Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course, Chair. So outreach really starts with relationship building, right? It's making contact with folks who live on the streets. It's understanding the barriers that they're facing to getting on to stable housing options, and that looks at all of the barriers. There could be physical health barriers, mental health barriers, limited ability to acquire income. There could be addictions and substance use issues. And our outreach teams try to assess all of a person's needs and then connect them to the supportive services that they need to stabilize. That could be, a short-term shelter stay with supportive services, and then eventually looking at housing placement and moving them on to permanent housing. So that outreach really is intended to assess those needs, including addiction and other issues.
Thank you. Commissioner West.
Welcome back, Adam. We're glad to have you back. Does, in that assessment process, which is so vital that we get a lay of the land when we're dealing with each person individually and tailoring care to them, do we help get them ready for housing? Because not everybody is necessarily housing ready, so there's so many steps in between before you go turnkey into a space that, but are we able to help connect them to shelter services if that's the first step, detox, stabilization, and to the point to where we get them? So I'm guessing, like, with the housing, how does it fit within the kind of, how do we make sure they're successful within that continuum?
Yeah, absolutely. Housing readiness is a huge part of that engagement. And when I said, in response to Chair Smith, the first part is relationship building, is because folks may not, that initial engagement, that conversation might be hard, right? And that person might be sort of reluctant to engage. They may, say, look, I'm fine where I'm at. I'm fine, living here in this situation. And we, our position is we know that's not what's best for them physically, emotionally, in terms of their long-term well-being. It's not what's best for the stability of our community, but that relationship building is first. And then there's a life cycle to that engagement, which ultimately leads to their readiness to engage in services. And then, housing stability. Okay, so you're ready to engage. What's it gonna take to help you get ready to successfully maintain stable housing on your own? So that's just a natural part of the life cycle, and our outreach teams are really, really skilled at this. There's a really good example. We recently launched rural outreach, right? Clackamas County's first ever rural outreach, funded by the new resources that we have from the state. And during the heat wave that we had in August, so what we've heard from our rural communities is that people are living in remote places, and those folks can be challenging to reach. But during the heat wave, folks came out seeking relief from the heat, and these new outreach teams were there and ready to engage with folks. So there was a benefit to that inclement weather event and our readiness to support those folks. It resulted in between 30 and 40 new contacts with folks living in these remote areas, and that was the start of this life cycle. And so now the outreach teams are kind of going back, continuing to engage with folks. They're doing laundry events in Molalla, for example, every Tuesday now. And so we've started this process of working towards eventually trying to get people onto housing opportunities.
I want to give a little feedback to that. I was out in the community in Oregon City at a restaurant, and the server there lives in Molalla, and they had a number of the chronic issues we have talked about at this board. And she pulled me aside, she grabbed me by I'm like, oh, hi. And she goes, Commissioner, I just want to let you know, Mollalla's doing better. I know we had a lot of issues with, we don't need to rehash the, we know the issues that we were going on with the warming center and whatnot, but it looks like we made a strong, good pivot. And I believe that what you just described, people feel like that's impacting their livability in their community. She's like, yeah, there was these people that were always in the park bench. We couldn't send our kids to the park and and all the whole story. She's like, it's just better. It's better since you guys are doing something in Clackamas. And so kudos to you guys for doing that. Are you working with Ant Farm in this process? Has that been a big part of it?
Yeah, Ant Farm is our most critical partner, them and the Father's Heart and Love One. But Ant Farm is so skilled at rural engagement, understanding the needs of our rural communities, really meeting the rural communities where they are, and trying to provide the level of support that's led by the unique community needs.
Fantastic, cool, thank you.
Thank you very much for presenting today. Seeing no objections,
Thank you. Item number 4, approval of amendment number 2, expanding the scope of work, modifying the term, and increasing funding for a personal services contract with Do Good Multnomah for Veterans Village Services. Amendment value is $32,252.98. Agreement value increased to $1,717,553.19 for 5 years. Funding is through Supportive Housing Services funds. No county general funds are involved.
Yes, this last one is an amendment with Do Good Multnomah. It intends to expand its veteran services by hiring a part-time senior director of veteran affairs, a senior manager, and an on-call support personnel. The contract duration will be reduced from 5 years to 2 years with the option to renew. And we're doing that reduction based on council recommendation from council so we can align it with all the rest of our contracts and to put it in a position where if there's increases in funding or decreases in funding, we can quickly adapt to that. So that's on county's recommendation that we're doing, going from 5 to a 2-year contract.
To 2 year. Okay,
model.
thank you for that. Commissioner West.
Is this for more control and accountability? Was there a need to have to make this change? Was something not working?
So I've been working with staff to actually initiate this change across many of our contracts. And so 5-year contracts are, on one hand, they're easier administratively, right? Because you have this 5-year contract in place and we don't need to bring it back to you for renewal or anything like that. But our system is really dynamic right now. You know that,
Yeah.
right? We're assessing system needs all the time. We're adjusting contract budgets. We're making additional investments in service provider contracts where they can deliver more services. And I said, hold on a second. The 5-year contracts set sort of an unrealistic expectation about the stability of the level of services year to year. Let's pause, okay? We have procurement authority on these contracts for 5 years. That's not in question. But let's work together with the provider on an annual basis to assess the level of service, adjust the contract budget, and do renewals annually. So each year in January, February, as we work towards building our next year's budget, we'll be working with the service providers to tune their budget to the level of services that we need. And then we'll bring all the renewals to you in May and June in anticipation of that new contract budget starting July 1st. So really it's something I've tried to do to institute more coherent structure and clarity to our annual contracting process.
I can see that. Yeah, that's super smart. I think that you're right in that method. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, to be real blatant about this part of it, as the chair mentioned earlier, how are you integrating a recovery model? So we can do agendas, we can do community agenda through our contracting. So this gives us that ability to, like Adam just said, to fine tune as we go. So as the board brings things forward, we can, it's going to take us about 3-6 months or whatever lag, but we can institute that into the new contracting. So this is a great mechanism to really move an agenda forward and bring it and integrate it and bring it all together. So that's another, we don't talk about it that way, but that's what we do with these contracts.
Fantastic.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing no objections, thank you both for bringing this important
you.
stuff forward.
I have the answer to Commissioner Scholl's earlier question about Good Shepherd Village. If you'd like, I'll just go ahead and follow up. So I was just messaging with Devin about the opening timeline at Good Shepherd. So that project is going to open next month. They're doing the pre-leasing right now. And so your action today with Catholic Charities just puts the contract in place so that we're ready with our supportive services as people start moving in there next month. So 0 occupancy today, but we expect that leasing will start happening next month.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you. I'd like to see that project one time soon.
Yeah, and Devin did just say that our PGA partners are working with Catholic Charities and Metro to plan a grand
Okay, good.
opening event.
Okay, good.
So
Thank
we'll get you that info.
We were there at the groundbreaking, I recall. Yep, Happy Valley.
Fantastic.
Is this a soft opening?
Is it a soft?
I think it'll be gradual, right?
It's a soft opening.
Yeah,
I think that's best. Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Seeing no objections.
All right, thank you, Rod and Adam. So, Commissioners, that is your consent agenda for today, and all of these items will be on your Thursday business meeting schedule. All right, up next, we do have an update on the Audi Road fire, and we have Dan Johnson, DTD Director, and Daniel Neibauer, Interim Director for Disaster Management, to provide that update.
Good morning again, Chair Smith and Commissioners. Dan Johnson, Director of the Department of Transportation and Development. And within my purview is the Development Agency, hence my appearance before you here today. I am joined by Daniel Neibauer, head of our Emergency Operations Center and Disaster Management. And we're here to kind of give you, a lot of this information has been sent out in updates to the board, but we thought we'd run through kind of a sequential summary real quick and a very thorough one for the board, and then answer any questions you might have, and then describe some of the pictures you're seeing and what that's telling you. So essentially, the site is 8855 Southeast Audi Road. It's the former Miles Fiberglass site. It's been under county ownership for some time. Miles had been leasing it back, but they had vacated the property here a couple years ago. The site had had a number of prior incidents, and essentially requiring us to continue to be actively securing the site to the greatest extent feasible. In fact, we visited the site as recently as last Thursday in response to concerns from the fire district about access to the site, so we resecured it at that point in time. Securing efforts started essentially with simple things like locking the doors and things of that nature. Then those advanced. We boarded up openings, penetration points to the building. Then those advanced. We added a fence to the facility and had staff go by and monitor it a variety of times. The site had been a location for a number of issues with vandalism that we were dealing with, and we did have a number of minor small fires there previously. In response to that and the concerns in the neighborhood and little ability to kind of repurpose the building at that point in time, the decision was made to demolish the facility. In fact, the Board of County Commissioners already approved the demolition contract. That demolition contract was approved by the board and was for approximately $265,000 to demo it.
How much?
$265,893. I'm not sure, just like mostly this is for public good, public information. When you demolish these older buildings, you have the demolition contract, and then as a part of that effort, you've got to go in and do an environmental assessment of those facilities, asbestos and other contaminants that are there. We essentially had 3 contractors on contract. We had a demolition contractor, and then we had a sub underneath that for environmental abatement, et cetera. We did a study, and that study determined there was asbestos in that building, which is not shocking. I mean, asbestos is everywhere, but essentially it informed us of that. And that those results were vetted through the Department of Environmental Quality, who then, and we had a plan of attack on dealing with that. They approved our plan. And then that plan was going to result in a pretty significant cost increase. Essentially, we have Monday of last week, we had an amendment for that contract in the amount of about additional $385,000 to deal with that. But it's what we have to do the way we have to do it. And essentially, I want to make sure we're clear, especially for the board and for our community, these are development agency funds. These are not general fund dollars we're talking about for those contracts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel and kind of run through Saturday's events, Sunday's events, and then we'll follow up and respond to questions.
So very early Saturday on September 16th at about 3:40, Clackamas Fire was dispatched to the location. Upon arrival, the battalion chief escalated to a 2-alarm fire, at which time disaster management was notified and began monitoring. It very quickly became a 3-alarm fire. Multiple fire agencies responded over the course of the fire. Clackamas Fire primarily, but Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, Gresham did. This also included some hazardous materials units, as Clack Fire was aware of the asbestos in the facility. At about 5:30 in the morning, fire requested some heavy equipment support from the county because the building was looking to collapse onto the roadway and over the TriMet tracks. The county responded with some of that heavy equipment and kept the building from collapsing in that direction. At about 7 a.m., the EOC, the Disaster Management Duty Officer, received a shelter-in-place notice request from Clackamas Fire for a quarter-mile radius around that facility due to their knowledge of asbestos and the way the plume was looking. So the duty officer coordinated with the Sheriff's Office and sent the shelter-in-place advisory shortly after it was requested. At that point, began notifying county staff and departments of a potential EOC activation. So the duty officer continued to monitor, and once the extent of the fire was better assessed and fire command determined that the shelter in place was likely to last several hours, the EOC was activated at about 8:30 in the morning. Out of those sections, myself, Dan Johnson, and Philip Mason Joyner were in unified command, given those were the three departments greatest affected. Disaster management staff came in to staff the planning section, the operations section, so did H3S staff was there. PGA came in for PIO. We requested technical assistance from the DEQ and the EPA, and they both sent and had folks on scene later in that day. Our initial focus was to support first responders on the scene, coordinate any resources they would need, also public messaging, get out what information we had and we knew as soon as we could, and then support any of the impacted community members. At this point in time, we're just under a shelter-in-place order. At about 9:35 in the morning, Fire Command and Hazmat became concerned about a shift in the wind that was impacting most directly two buildings that were across the street, and they went over to directly contact those residents with an advisory to evacuate. The county was not requested to send an alert at that time. We did contact Red Cross as a warning if this evacuation continues, we would like you to set up a shelter. And Red Cross responded and was waiting for further notice. Work in the EOC at this point began expanding to include activating contractors that were already contracted for the demolition because they had the expertise to do so. That also allowed us not to request assistance from the EPA. Either way, the county would have been responsible for the cleanup costs, but the EPA is the most expensive option out there. So having these contractors already in contract definitely saved the county a lot of money. We also began looking at a sheltering assessment and sheltering coordination if that were to be needed, and we increased our messaging at this point in time to try to get as much information out to the public as possible. Our primary focus came on the 8810 and 8820 Southeast Oddie Roads, those two apartment buildings that were greatest impacted by the smoke. Mobilizing a testing contractor to begin to do air and surface testing. Again, those were contractors already under contract, an abatement contractor to do debris collection for those locations that it was found outside of the direct incident site. Mobilize transportation maintenance to do street cleaning already to begin to affect that. At about 11 a.m., fire began to get a better handle on the site and began to call it. I don't think it was quite under control at that time, but it was getting close. They knew that they had an end in sight and began to demobilize from the site and monitor some hot spots. At about 1:30, Clackamas Fire advised us that the shelter in place could be lifted, but retained the evacuation advisory for two buildings, 8810 and 8820, should remain. Disaster management at that point sent out another alert advising of the change in the shelter in place, but also advising the residents of those two buildings they should remain. By mid-afternoon, it seemed likely that the evacuation advisory would last at least until the next day, Sunday. So the EOC requested that the Red Cross set up a shelter, and they did so at the community college. The EOC also requested and received a contact list for building residents from the property management company so that we could message them more directly. And by late afternoon, the EOC had sent text and voice recording to the residents on the contact list, as well as calling each one of those numbers to advise the individual residents of the continued evacuation advisory, as well as let them know the location of the Red Cross shelter at the community college. And we also activated a county contract for 24-hour drive-by and site security of the incident site through Monday, as obviously the firefighters, when they went to battle the fire, had to move and had kind of destroyed some of the fencing around there. We wanted to make sure that individuals didn't continue to go back there or anybody interested to put themselves in danger.
Sunday. I have to give actually credit to Daniel for this idea to ensure the public information was there's a lot of transparency and information coming out of the EOC. Danielle made a fabulous recommendation to have a public meeting, which was great, and that's with all of our partners. I do want to, well, we'll get into that more. We did advanced air quality testing. We not only did testing outside with our contractors outside of the facility, we also did it, started doing it on the 4th floor of all the units. And based on the results of those particular tests, DEQ suggested that we didn't have to do every unit because they were coming back good for air quality. So we did randomized testing at DEQ. So basically random units on different floors to kind of see what their air quality is. Reports from the Red Cross was that no one used the shelter. No one chose to use the shelter. They found either alternative means or they chose to stay in their units. And so essentially the EOC shifted strategies and looked to get individuals who may request housing or relocation into hotels and motels. We only have 2 residents that chose that option. Results received were good and below any actionable levels. This is a result of the air testing, below any actionable levels by DEQ. Public Health coordinated with DEQ, EPA, Oregon Health Authority to assess, and Clackamas County Public Health, Dr. Sarah Present, in concert with Phil and Mason Joyner, essentially found the chance of significant asbestos on the surface tests. That's the next test. So we had the air test and the surface test. And the surface test, we weren't supposed to get the results back until tomorrow. But I've got news on that. They didn't believe the presence of asbestos was likely, and they felt it was safe for those individuals to reoccupy their units if they chose. At 3:15 p.m., we removed those alerts and notified the public and the occupants directly of 8810 and 8820. And even those who were offered hotel options, they were still offered those options until the test results came back for the surface test, if they wished. At 6 p.m., we held a public meeting at Mount Scott Elementary. Participants included Daniel and myself from EOC and the county, Dr. Sarah Present from Public Health, our partners over at Clackamas Fire. DEQ was there, EPA was there. Also, I want to thank the PIO, Dylan Blaylock, and other individuals who helped facilitate that and set it up. It was an excellent event. I think there was 3 media outlets there, and not a significant public attendance, but there were some good questions that were asked. Monday, we coordinated with County Council in discussion about the way to most efficiently modify the current demolition, abatement, and testing contracts. Keep in mind, those contracts were for that site. That event happens, we've got to not only we had to do on the fly, do an emergency adjustment to our plans and approvals with DEQ. Their partnership, EPA's partnership in this event has been stellar. I just want to share that. Their response and evaluation, I've never heard these words come out of EPA and DEQ's mouth. Their response to the response that we were doing was exemplary. In fact, EPA said they were going to demobilize, I think on Sunday. Said, you guys are doing great. And I said, hey, can you stick around for another 24 hours? And he said, yes. So they are very happy with our response to the event. But essentially, we had those contracts for that particular site, but we had activated those contracts to do other work on adjoining property. And so we basically had to modify those contracts and adjust those contracts. Pursuant to county code and ORS, we sought and received authorization from the county administrator for an emergency procurement services. That's to adjust those contracts that we already had and implement them. I can tell you yesterday afternoon, staff was mobilized from our contractors, are mobilized on site. Perimeter fencing was put back in place. We've got about 10 or 15 panels that are missing. Those are on order. Those will be set up either this afternoon or tomorrow. Those are mostly along the back of the property, not the front. The front is entirely fenced. Secondly, we have on-site security 24-hour when, I should say, at any non-work time, there's security on site provided through the contractor. And that contract, there's a 30 and 40-yard dumpster already on the site with abatement lining and prepared. Today, the excavator is supposed to be delivered and work is going to get underway. Right now, we're estimating I've been told an estimate of, 3 to 4 weeks to get that thing down, maybe sooner, who knows. I did want to highlight the fact that we delivered some photos to you this morning. My apologies, these were taken late yesterday afternoon, and I wish I could have them in a PowerPoint, but time's kind of getting away from me. The first photo shows our crew, not our contractors' crews out there. They have the fence off Audi Road up and secured. The second picture, although you can't see it, it's a lovely security vehicle right here. That's that blue car right there with our security staff on site. But it shows you the back end of the building and some of the damage that was there. Picture number 3, I wanted to draw your attention to the cones and the taping here. Essentially, what that taping is it's taping that was established by our consultants, our environmental consultants, to inform any individual working on that site. If you cross that line, you have to have protective gear in place. But if you're outside of that line, you're okay. Okay, and so essentially that's what that taping is there for. Our fourth picture is essentially the back of the facility. The fifth picture is a picture off of D Street, which is adjoining this facility.
What's the D Street photo?
That's this photo right here. This is adjacent. You know where that parking area is down the road? Yeah, that's basically showing the fences up along that road.
Okay.
Interesting enough, this is a really interesting photo. You know why this photo is so interesting? The site's muddy.
The site's muddy?
That is a good thing. There's a lot of water on that site, and it is still wet. Why is that a good thing? Because obviously it asbestos in the dust, and it keeps everything down, okay?
Are we keeping it moist?
Okay, come back to that. It is moist, and we're going to make it wetter, essentially. Essentially, this again shows you looking back towards, back to the north and to the west. You can see we have got containers on the site already. We had staff out there with DEQ, security, EPA, our contractors. This is the last photo. And work is beginning. Essentially, we've asked DEQ to allow us to use mechanical means of removal. And when we bring these excavators in to do mechanical means of removal for this abatement, we are required to water that site down, and that is a part of that process, yes. There's a couple things I forgot. I do want to note the fact that at our public meeting, we were informed by the sheriff, by our partners at Clackamas Fire that they believe the fire was set intentionally. They believe it was set up outside the building, up in the northwest portion of the property to some extent. They are working hand in hand with Clackamas Sheriff's Office in that investigation, but we haven't received any additional information except for their initial assessment. And hot off the press, I just got the text. We got our surface tests back, and there is no asbestos in any of those tests in either of those buildings.
Nice.
And so we will be acting on that information, informing those individuals once we get done here, updating you, and working to adjust the levels of EOC. And I'm not sure if you want to talk a little more about that.
So future plans for the EOC, we are activated and in person today, and we're continuing to help impacted residents, anybody who's reporting debris on their property. We're getting that over to our contractors so they can go get that taken care of. And then other concerns, giving guidance on how to clean, was food safe if it was left out, if you know what to do with laundry, if there's needed at all, even car washes, because getting asbestos wet is a good thing. So if we can help someone wash their car, we're going to do that. We're going to shift to a remote model, continuing that support. We're seeing less of those support requests, so we're going to shift to be remote tomorrow, and continue working in that cleanup requests and guidance. With those results, and assuming that we're seeing, again, decreased amounts of community support needed and information, I'm going to deactivate the EOC Thursday and this is for both the Otter Creek and the Camp Creek, so I'll let Camp Creek slide in here a little bit. Due to both incidents are stabilizing, there's minimal to no impact on community members, and any response is completely within the capability of either the county departments or, in the case of the Forest Service, their capability. So you will hopefully get a last email from me on Thursday, and let's hope for no more and in the near future.
Give me a hallelujah.
That's very comprehensive presentation. Thank you both for coming. Daniel, I want to thank you for the several times a day, you would send to the EPC and the Board of County Commissioners updates on what was happening. And I was very thankful for that because it answered my questions. You were able to abate the spread of asbestos through smoke and the best that you could on that. I understand Sunday was the 5th birthday of your daughter and you had to miss it because you were working for Clackamas County on this very important detail and saving the citizens of Clackamas County. And tell her happy birthday, that her daddy is very important and had to go to work. It doesn't make a difference to a 5-year-old, but hey, thank you for that. Dan, equally, I know you were involved in this too. I do have a couple of questions to ask. So the initial demo cost was $265, and then once, is it true, once asbestos was discovered, that's an additional $385? So we're at $650,000.
Correct. That's a very good question, Chair. And so the work that we're doing right now is essentially to shift the contract to a time and materials contract. Just not knowing the scope and scale, and probably we believe right now, we haven't got confirmation of that, but keeping that dollar amount the same, and then just seeing where the time and materials contracting and costing's going, and then we can update the board if there's some shifts in that.
Okay. So that was my next question. Since the fire, does it cost any more? It sounds initially maybe not, but we understand as you get into this, and you know, since the building would burn, maybe it took away a lot of disposable of the material that you would have to haul away. I don't know. I don't want to be flippant with that, but thank you. I suppose none of this is covered by insurance, and this is a cost that is borne by the development agency?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned causation, that's being investigated. Do we have any concerns or reports on people suffering adverse health conditions because of the smoke in the area? None?
No.
None that we know of?
None that we know of.
Okay, thank you, because that is a concern. And the windage, it was a southerly wind, I understand, that did that. I had a report that, you know, the iPhones that we all sign up for the notifications, that those messages that came out were somewhat confusing on what to do. Have you got any feedback on that at all?
We haven't received much feedback from the public. There was one report of a woman who felt she didn't get notified in time, but we haven't received messaging on the messages being confusing in what they said.
If I could expand on that as well, I just want to emphasize the great work that EOC and all of our partners and our fire partners and the sheriff have done. But I guess one of the things that really needs to be acknowledged is the fact that there is every attempt, every option available to us to notify people we took. Mm-hmm. And so you had the emergency notification that went out from EOC. Mm-hmm. We had great partners from H3S, Brenda Durbin and Vahid Brown, that contacted the property manager of Pedcore that owns the property next door, got phone numbers for every one of those individuals in every one of those units. They called those individuals, every single one of them they made a call to. Mm-hmm. And so no one's perfect, and we acknowledge that, but the extent that we went to try to at least inform individuals was significant. So.
Well, when we were at the dedication, the groundbreaking for the Concord Library over on Concord Street, we're at 1 o'clock, we're in the middle of our speeches, and I could hear that notification going off. And I was ready to go up to give a speech, so I didn't take my phone, but I did have a notification on my phone, and I don't live in the area. The confusion came that people who got notices, it was either the shelter-in-place order had been lifted or an evacuation recommendation for a level 1 evacuation, which means you can stay in place. And I think it's confusing to the people on what these notices mean. Because if you have a level 1 evacuation, that's purely up to your discretion. It's recommended, but you don't really have to evacuate even on level 3. No, you don't have to evacuate. Nobody's going to make you go. And I experienced that with some people during our fires in September of 20 on that. Well, thank you for your good work on that. We look forward to continued progress to be made on this cleanup. Commissioner West, you're in the queue.
Daniel, maybe we should just call them Dan Squared. Thank you for your presentation. It was fantastic. Some of my questions have been answered just through the process, and the same questions as Chair Smith. Do we suspect, though, that the cost will come down because of the fire, or do we suspect that is now just messier and less controlled and will go up the demo cost? Like, what is that? Is this kind of uncharted and we don't quite know?
I don't have any information that suggests either or. I don't know. But essentially what we do know is the fact that the knowns have changed, and there are some more unknowns now, and that the contract amendment we're looking to put forward will allow those contractors flexibility to deal with those issues that we have to deal with.
Okay.
And that's essentially the intent, especially when you go from a controlled situation to an uncontrolled situation. I don't want to say uncontrolled because it's pretty controlled right now, but to this new situation that we're dealing with.
Yeah. I wrote down here investigation versus abatement. Are we hindered somewhat in getting this cleaned up because we have a criminal I'm assuming a criminal investigation going on if there's any evidence for prosecution for somebody who started the fire?
No, we asked Clackamas Fire if we had full control of the site. I don't think so. There's no limitations on us being able to move or clean up anything on there.
So they're done with their piece.
They've gotten whatever they need to go to complete their investigation.
Okay.
And I guess to expand on that, their only work is essentially to be of assistance. Should we turn something over and there be a hotspot, they're mobile. They mobilized on a small hotspot yesterday afternoon, and they came down, and they've been great partners in that effort.
We have direct contact with them. We can call the battalion chief. He'll send out an engine and put out any little hotspots that are found.
Oh, so you've moved debris and there's still like some embers or whatever.
Right.
Okay. And one question, just because I want to make sure, do we also test water for this, or is it just air and surface? Why, or we don't have to worry about the contaminants getting in any kind of groundwater, water supply, anything like that?
Water's a good thing.
For this, we like water.
Yeah, but what I should tell you as well, we did partner. I'm not sure if my great partner Greg Geist is in the middle. He's left. I actually called Greg Geist Saturday morning, and basically their staff had already mobilized out there because the concern is the fact that when you put water on this, are you containing the water to the greatest extent feasible, and are you limiting its ability to get into public drainways? So they blocked and contained those storm drain areas, and they put additional water containment in place. And then in addition, they've asked us, as we did with any fires, once the demolition is done, as a part of our contract, we'll have to go back and clean that private line, drainage line that goes through to make sure it's clean and adequate. Yep.
Okay.
And the drinking water for individuals does not come from an area that would have been affected at all. And asbestos is naturally occurring. And so DEQ and EPA at the levels we saw, and particularly with the surface results, anything that would have come from other than the site, so ash that went further away and was draining, was not of concern to them.
And then one last question that's some of this is piggybacking on what the chair asked, but I live in Wilsonville, signed up for the alerts, was a thought of mine. I looked and I didn't get an alert, but maybe Wilsonville's too far away. So this was more immediate. So my thoughts were maybe the chair was in Malala. I don't know how that's closer.
No, I was actually in.
Oh, you were in the vicinity.
I was in the vicinity,
Okay.
and because, so it's.
It's not by address.
No, it's by vicinity of where.
okay.
Your iPhone knows where you are.
Right. Unfortunately, we didn't.
So I sent two types of alerts that day for that initial alert, and one was to the opt-ins, and that very specifically locates someone who has signed up within that quarter-mile area. And then I also sent the wireless emergency alert, and that's the one that we say splashes over, right? It says, we think you're in this quarter-mile area, or maybe you're close by, and it ranges. I would say it's a great thing that you didn't get it in Wilsonville, because often we see it splash pretty far. This one didn't. That makes me happy to hear that.
Okay, good. So that's good news. And then I guess the only thing is when we had the Camp Creek fire, there was some phone conversation. I'm just curious if there was a decision to not, I don't know if you got it, maybe the chair got a phone call, but I didn't know phone call that weekend to the board members. I'm wondering if that would have been.
A what?
A phone call just saying, hey, do you guys know this is happening? We got emails, but like, hey, this is happening. These are the alerts coming. If people ask you, I didn't know if that would be maybe a benefit or suggestion that if it's a kind of a big a big event. We're lucky it was somewhat wet and it didn't spread, that the board would be at least contacted by phone.
To get a phone notification.
Just like a conversation from you or Gary or somebody, say, hey, we're working on this, we got it.
Yeah.
Might want to check your email.
Yeah.
I can talk
Yeah,
with.
and we did get emails, right? So,
Yeah.
but like, just at Camp Creek, I had multiple phone but
Yeah, I can talk with county administration on getting a different notification chain for a more emergent and immediate information.
Yeah, but overall, I am not complaining. You guys are stellar job. Yeah, great job, and thanks for the comprehensive update.
Thank you. Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, good morning. This Miles Fiberglass building, we had a history of trespassing problems there. Does the development agency or Clackamas County have any other similar buildings that we might need to increase our security concerns about?
That's a great question. Buildings, no. We don't have anything that's unoccupied like this facility. And the intent originally was a discussion around maybe the ability to repurpose it for like incubator space for small business or something like that. That went out the window with some of those initial acts of vandalization, whatever. Well, it's been a long couple days. We made the conscious decision to advance the demolition contract. And we have had interest from a number of individuals about possibly redeveloping that site. But we, obviously the facility on there was a detriment to that dialogue. And it became time. We worked closely with CCSO on that property. We worked closely with Clackamas Fire on that property. It was readily apparent it was becoming a liability, and as it's played out, it's an unfortunate set of circumstances that someone intentionally set a fire there, and now we are going to deal with it appropriately.
Okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from anyone? Thank you both. I appreciate you coming here before the board, giving us an assessment of what's going on, and for the public to see as well.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you. Dan, you can stay. Daniel, thank you very much.
You don't want to do this?
All right, next up is the City of Canby use of sequential review of urban growth boundary process. I believe we had a conversation about this week, but there has been a few changes to the letter, from what I understand. Dan?
Thank you so much. We talked about this last week. The board granted the chair authority to do this. There was a simple mix-up with the fact that there was an amendment and a change to, there's no substantial or significant change to what the authorization was from the board, but the materials were different. And so we wanted to make sure the board got the most up-to-date materials. Essentially, the only change in this materials from last week to this week, Task 1, which was an economic opportunities analysis, was removed from the work program since it was adopted by Canby City Council on September 6th. It basically just changed the work program, which then basically the city sent us a new form to sign. We wanted to just make sure you're aware of that. There's no material change in your approval whatsoever. So.
Okay. Questions or comments? Do we need a motion on this, Nancy?
Did you have a motion last week?
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Yeah, you
I'll
authorized
accept
the board
motion.
chair to
I'll
Let's do it,
accept
just to be
motion.
safe. Thank you.
Is it an amendment to the old motion, or is it a brand-new motion?
Staff is requesting authorization for the chair to sign the updated election to use sequential review process to allow Canby to submit this request to DLCD. It is at the bottom of page 1.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner West has moved that give the chair authorization to sign the updated election to use sequential review process to allow Canby to submit this request to LCDC. Commissioner Schrader has seconded the motion. Further discussion? Seeing none, Tony, would you please take the poll?
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, Dan. Okay, next we have the Clackamas County Advisory Boards and Commissions, and we have Tony Marinick, clerk to the board.
The Clackamas County Community Health Council under Health, Housing, and Human Services, through a recruitment process, has one recommendation for appointment. The recommendation is Brianne Salvati to a first term.
I will accept the motion.
Chair, I move that we accept the recommendation of Brianne Salvati for an appointment to a first term to end on 9/31/2025.
Second.
Commissioner West has moved for approval of the appointment of Brianne Salvati to the Community Health Council. Commissioner Schrader has seconded the motion. Further discussion? Seeing none, Tony, please take the poll.
Commissioner Schull. Aye. Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Nancy?
All right, thank you. Next is review of our agenda for Thursday's business meeting. We have 3 public hearings. One is for the Housing Authority. We have one for the Development Agency, and then we have a general county public hearing on a board order. Then we also have consent agenda, public communication, the county administrator update, and then the commissioner's communications. Does this meet with your approval?
Any questions on the business meeting agenda? Seeing none, thank you.
All right, thank you. That brings us to commissioner's communications, Chair.
Commissioner Communication, Commissioner Schrader, would you like to start off?
Yeah, I think that we had the opportunity. I think that you were there, Chair, with Paul Savas, and it was great to be at the ground opening at the Concord School and the groundbreaking for the new library there. That's been a lot of years coming, and everybody was excited, and we got ice cream and celebrations. So I really appreciated the fact that we've always held libraries front and center with everything that we do. And that's about all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner West.
Last week was nuts, but in a good way. It was busy, busy, busy. I'm not going to say a lot. I'm going to save some of my comments for later in the week. But I'm super excited about the momentum that we have regarding addressing a main policy issue for this county around addiction, mental health, and homelessness, and the leadership that this county is showing. We had a very successful summit by all measures. So kudos to the staff that pulled something off that hadn't been done, I think, in a metro area anywhere up and down the West Coast. And I think it really helped to galvanize not just the Board of Commissioners, not just the staff and Health and Human Services, but also other local leaders within Clackamas County. Found it quite productive and enjoyed the programming. And even the panelists were blown away by the vision and the desire of Clackamas County to be a leader in this space. So great job, and I'll just be brief today and report maybe more on that later this week, but super proud of what we accomplished last week. So good job, everybody.
Thank you. Commissioner Schull?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. This afternoon, we had scheduled a meeting with the Hoodland Library, but Commissioner Savas is ill. He is a history of that library, and so that meeting was postponed till Commissioner Savas can join us. This afternoon at 5:30, I'll be at the Will Hoyt Springs for the Clackamas County Parks and Forestry meeting. And also last Wednesday, the Clackamas County Fair Board met. And the takeaway I wanted to pass on to you was that they're progressing on the new barn, but as of last week, their estimated start date of construction won't be until late winter or early spring. They're making progress. I also talked with County Operation Officer Bush about ARPA dollar deadlines, and I went over those deadlines for contracting and expenditure with the Fair Board. They're comfortable with those deadlines. They're confident they'll meet those deadlines. So that's all I have for you right now.
Thank you. Yes, some of us attended the groundbreaking for the much anticipated Oak Grove Library on Saturday, and it was a huge public event and very well received. What I really liked is we had our, gold painted shovels. We were doing the groundbreaking. They also had a sandbox with little miniature shovels for the kids. And that was more fun, really, right, going forward. It's a considerable investment in this area with $21.3 million set aside for the library. And it's at the park area, too, an additional $17 million at the North Clackamas Recreation and Parks District. That is, Commissioners, a $40 million investment in this one area, and that is huge. And I think when we're out talking, we need to remind people that is a $40 million investment for this area, and that is substantial. You add into it Gladstone Library, which is what, Nancy, $9 million? So we're almost at $50 million investment in this area. I don't know of any other area in Clackamas County in a single small community that gets that, nor do I know of any other area in other counties in Oregon that gets this type of money. And so people were grateful. I hope they can continue with their thanks and their gratitude for the members of this board who worked really hard to make this happen. And Paul Savas was instrumental in doing this. He is on a special task force for the last 2 years. And just send our thanks to Commissioner Savas on this. I enjoyed very much our Clackamas Addiction and Recovery Summit, CARS for short, that was held last week. I learned a lot. I listened. I think we have a basic roadmap to going forward on tackling this horrific problem that Oregon finds themselves in on the addiction of drugs that used to be illegal and now are legal. And we look forward to a lot of work on that. Commissioners, seeing no further business before this meeting, we are adjourned.